Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at one of those moments in history where everything just changes. One event that sends catastrophic ripples across the entire globe.
We're talking about the Wall Street crash of 1929, the WSC.
Exactly. And not just the crash itself, but specifically how this one financial disaster in New York became the absolute death blow for the League of Nations.
It really is the key. For anyone studying this period, especially for something like the IGCSEs, it's the bridge. It explains how you go from the cooperative spirit of the 1920s to the aggressive nationalism of the 1930s.
Right, it's the inflection point. So our mission today is pretty clear. First, we need to quickly get our heads around the mechanics of the crash. Not just stocks went down, but why the system was so fragile.
And then, the main event, we're going to trace how that crash led, step by step, to the total paralysis of the League of Nations. There are six really clear ways it did this.
Let's do it. So let's start before the crash, the Roaring '20s. America is, for lack of a better word, booming.
It's the engine of the world. After World War I, the U.S. is lending huge amounts of money to Europe, especially Germany, to rebuild. And that's creating this incredible cycle of confidence and growth back home.
And confidence is key here. That confidence led to this fever in the stock market. Now, we're not going to get bogged down on what shares are, but we do need to talk about speculating.
Right. And specifically, speculating with borrowed money. That's the crucial part.
So what is that? What were people actually doing?
Well, speculating is just buying something, in this case shares, hoping the price goes up so you can sell it for a quick profit. The dangerous part was that people weren't using their own savings. They were buying on margin.
Which means they were borrowing.
Exactly. They'd go to a bank, borrow money, and use that cash to buy shares. The bet was that the share price would rise so fast they could sell, pay back the loan, and still walk away with a profit.
It's a massive gamble. And the entire system is built on the idea that prices only go up.
And the scale was just staggering. The sources say that between 1924 and 1929, the number of people owning shares shot up by 500%.
Wow.
And in 1929 alone, banks lent $9 billion just to speculators. $9 billion.
That's an incredible amount of risk baked into the system.
It was pure euphoria. You see your neighbor getting rich buying United Carbide shares. Their value almost quadrupled in late 1928, and you think, I have to get in on this.
So you have this huge bubble floating on nothing but credit and confidence. What was the pin? What made it pop?
Simple economics, really. The
Yeah.
realization that companies were making too much stuff. An economist named Charles Babson warned everyone. He said, despite all the advertising, there are too many goods and not enough customers.
Which means profits will fall.
And if profits fall, dividends fall, and the share price has to come down, the whole thing was fundamentally unstable.
So when did the panic actually kick in?
The first big wave of selling hit on September 5th, 1929. The moment confidence wobbled, all those people who had borrowed money, they panicked.
Because they couldn't afford to lose. They owed the bank.
Exactly right. So they had to sell immediately. But of course, when everyone sells at once, it just pushes the price down even faster, which forces more people to sell. It's a death spiral.
And what about the banks during all this? Weren't they trying to stop it?
They tried. They pooled their money to buy up huge amounts of stock, just to try and restore confidence. But it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a bucket. It was just too big.
So the shares become worthless, the speculators are bankrupt, and the banks...
The banks start to fail. That $9 billion it lent out, it's gone. It's never coming back. And so the banks themselves start to collapse.
The numbers are grim.
Mm-hmm.
659 banks failed in 1929. The next year, it was over 1,300.
A total systemic collapse. And this is the pivot for our whole deep dive. Because the U.S. was the world's banker, its collapse didn't stay in America. It went global.
Right. And this is where we connect Wall Street to the League of Nations in Geneva.
Mm.
So the Depression hits. Let's walk through those 6 destructive impacts. What was the first one?
The first, and maybe the most poisonous, was the rise of dictatorships and political violence.
How does that connect?
Well, think about it. Mass unemployment in a country like Germany. Poverty in Japan, where, say, silk workers lose their entire livelihood because no one abroad is buying silk anymore. People become desperate, angry.
And desperate, angry people look for extreme solutions.
Precisely. They start listening to dictators, to these extreme right-wing leaders who promise simple answers. They say, blame the foreigners, or we're a superior nation. We should just take what we need by force.
And this wasn't just an isolated thing.
Not at all. The data is clear. Between 1929 and 1939, 25 countries became dictatorships. That's a huge shift away from democracy and cooperation.
25. Okay, so that's the broad trend. But let's zero in on the most critical example. Germany. Our source says the WSC led directly to Hitler's rise.
It's a direct cause and effect. Remember, America was bankrolling Germany's recovery. When the crash hit, U.S. banks needed that money back immediately.
So they called in their loans.
They pulled the plug. And German industry, which was totally dependent on those loans, just collapsed overnight. Mass unemployment, hyperinflation returning. The democratic Weimar government couldn't cope.
And it lost all credibility.
It proved to millions of Germans that democracy had failed them. The economic chaos created the perfect environment for an aggressive nationalist leader like Hitler to seize power. No crash, no loan recall, no Hitler. It's that direct.
That's a chillingly clear connection. So impact 1 is dictatorships. Impact 2 is the specific case of Germany. This leads to the third impact, right? A change in how countries dealt with each other.
Yes. A global shift to what you'd call nationalistic foreign policy. Leaders quickly figured out that if things are terrible at home, a good way to stay in power is to, create a distraction abroad.
Start a fight with a neighbor to rally everyone together.
Or just direct public anger towards another country. It resulted in this much more aggressive, selfish, my country first attitude everywhere. The idea of partnership was dead. Everyone was a competitor.
And if everyone is a competitor, that leads us straight to impact number 4, empire building.
It's the logical next step. In this new cutthroat global economy, cooperation is gone. So countries like Japan and Italy look at the world and think, the only way to guarantee our supply of raw materials, oil, rubber, iron, is to conquer the lands that have them.
Because you can't rely on trade anymore.
Exactly. Trade is being shut down by tariffs and protectionism. So Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931, it wasn't just random aggression, it was a calculated economic move to secure resources to keep its factories running.
And that, of course, creates the very international conflicts the League was designed to prevent.
The very ones.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the 5th point. The absolute end of cooperation. The ideal the League was built on was just shattered.
Radical self-interest takes over.
Completely. The League's whole model was based on the idea that countries would sometimes act for the greater good, even if it wasn't in their immediate interest. But when your own people are starving, no politician can afford to be philanthropic.
There's no political will to make sacrifices for a country halfway around the world.
None. Every decision becomes about survival at home. And you see it when Japan just walks out of the League over Manchuria. They're basically saying their economic needs are more important than the entire system of international law.
And the League couldn't do anything, which I suppose is the final nail in the coffin, your 6th point, the weakness of Britain and France.
The League's 2 main pillars. But they were suffering from the Depression, too. They were economically crippled.
So they couldn't back up the League's decisions with any real force.
How could they? Think about sanctions. How can you impose tough trade sanctions on Japan when your own economy is collapsing and you need every customer you can get?
And they certainly weren't going to send their armies.
Absolutely not. They didn't have the money to build up their armies, and their people would never have supported the cost in money or in lives of a foreign war. The League had no teeth because its dentists were broke.
So if we pull all of that together, it's a devastatingly clear picture. The Wall Street crash creates economic chaos.
That chaos breeds political extremism and dictators.
These new aggressive states are driven by desperation to expand and grab resources.
And the League's main backers, Britain and France, are too poor and too weak to stop them.
The entire system of collective security was destroyed by poverty.
That's it, in a nutshell. The Depression proved that when push comes to shove, self-interest will always trump global cooperation. The League was built for a world that simply didn't exist anymore after 1929.
It's a powerful lesson that politics is so often downstream from economics. The League's ideals were noble, but its foundations were financial. Let's end with a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. Our sources mention the USA was the great creditor, the engine of the 20s, but it was famously never a member of the League of Nations. So consider this. If the U.S. had been a member, would its own economic collapse have forced the League to create some kind of global response, a mechanism to soften the blow? Or would America's presence inside the League have just dragged the whole institution down even faster? It really makes you question whether any system of global governance can survive the collapse of its most powerful member.